We begin with the chapter Social Change and Social Order in Rural and Urban Society. Now, understand one thing: change is a permanent feature of the human society. If you look at it, the discipline of sociology came into existence as an effort to make sense of the rapid changes that Western European society had experienced between the 17th and 19th century. If you go by the existence of the human civilization, then it is 6,000 years old. And in that timeline, last 400 years or so has been one of constant and rapid change. From those 400 years or so, the pace of change has been very rapid in the last 100 years, and within those 100 years, the latter 50 years have witnessed an accelerated change as compared to the former 50 years. So we see that the speed of change has been increasing rapidly as we are moving forward in time. So the question arises is, what is social change? Well, in common parlance, any kind of change, whether political or economic, is called social change. Sociologists have tried to make the term more specific and relevant to the theory. I begin with Giddens' definition, which said that at the most basic level, social change refers to changes that are significant. That is, changes which alter the underlying structure of an object or situation over a period of time. So, from this definition, we understand for something to qualify as a social change, it should be both intensive and extensive, and also have a big impact over a large sector of the society. Change can be further classified according to number 1, its pace or speed, number 2, its nature or the kind of impact it has on society, number 3, its sources or causes. Let's first begin with the pace or speed of change. By pace, it means that whether the kind of change is a slow one, like evolution, or a fast one, like revolution. Evolution is a change that is extended over a long period of time. Like Charles Darwin's theory of evolution on how living organisms evolved over several centuries by adapting themselves to natural circumstances. Those organisms who were able to best adapt to the environment survived. And this idea was the survival of the fittest was emphasized in his theory. Darwin suggested that humans evolved from seaborne life forms to land-based mammals through various stages spanning many centuries. Although Darwin's theory referred to natural processes, it was soon adapted to the social world and was termed as social Darwinism, a theory that emphasizes the importance of adaptive change. Now let's look at social change that comes quickly, even suddenly, and is called a revolutionary change. It is mainly used in the context of political change. Say, for example, the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution, whereby the ruling class, in this case the monarchy, is overthrown by the challengers. But the term has also been used to refer to sharp, sudden, and total transformation of the other kind too, like the Industrial Revolution and the Telecommunication Revolution. Now, let's look at change based on nature or impact, and these are number 1, structural change, and number 2, changes in ideas, values, and beliefs. Now, structural change entails change in the structure of the society, to its institutions, or the rules by which these institutions are run. A good example would be the emergence of paper money as currency that brought about tremendous changes in the organization of financial markets and transactions. In the past, precious metals like gold or silver were used, and the value of the gold and silver coin was directly linked to the value of gold and silver it contained. On the other hand, paper money has no relationship to the paper it is printed on or the printing cost. This made things relatively easier and helped in the growth of the credit market and also helped change the structure of banking and finance. This in turn changed the organization of economic life. Now let us look at changes in values and beliefs. Well, these changes in values and beliefs also led to social change. For example, changes in the idea of children and childhood. Till the 19th century, it was considered good and proper that children start to work as soon as they are able to. That is, they were considered as small or mini adults. And there was no special concept of childhood. The late 19th century and early 20th century, the idea of childhood as a special stage of life became accepted, and laws were put in place to ban child labor. At the same time, compulsory education for children gained prominence, and many laws were passed to this effect. In India, although we find small children working in tea shops or restaurants or the carpet weaving industry, etc., we must note that child labor is illegal, and for the employers, it is a punishable offense. Now, let's look at the most common way of classifying social change, that is, by its causes or sources. Causes can be internal or endogenous, and external or exogenous causes. There are five broad types of sources or causes of social change, and they are: number one, environmental; number two, technological; number three, economic; number four, political; and number five, cultural. So we'll go over them one by one. We begin with environmental. Understand that human life in the past was determined to a large extent by nature, ecology, and the physical environment. Why? As they were unable to control nature, so we have the food that the people ate, the clothes that they wore, the economic activities that they practiced were nature dependent. With technological advancement, there came a decrease in the influences of the environment on the human society, as humans were able to adapt and overcome the problems posed by nature. But the question is, how does nature play an important role in social change? Sudden and catastrophic events such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, etc., can change society drastically. Example, the tsunami of 2004. These changes are often irreversible as they don't allow a return to the way things were earlier. There are numerous instances of natural disasters leading to total transformation and sometimes total destruction of societies in history. Note there are constructive changes as well. For example, the discovery of oil in the desert regions of the Middle East and the discovery of gold in California in the 19th century are all examples of how environment and ecological factors bring about a constructive and complete transformation of these places, and hence a big social change. Now, let's look at the change due to technology and economy. Technology helps us to resist, control, adapt, or harness nature in different ways. Technology with the market institution can make a significant social impact. like the discovery of oil or the tsunami. Industrial revolution is the most massive and visible social change brought about by technological change to the economy. The steam engine made a powerful impact on the society as steam power allowed the emerging large scale industries to use a source of energy that was more high powered and continuous form of energy as compared to the animals or humans that were used earlier on. When it was harnessed, two modes of transport like the steamship and the railways, then it virtually transformed the dynamics of the transportation and communication system and in turn the economy. The railroads played an important role in linking up the different parts of the country in Europe and in India, and steamships made ocean voyages much faster and more reliable, affecting international trade and migration. In fact, these innovations impacted the social, cultural, and demographic dimensions of the world. Sometimes a technological invention or discovery may produce limited immediate effects, as though it was lying dormant. A change in the economic context may suddenly change the social significance of the same invention and give it recognition as a historic event, like the discovery of gunpowder and writing paper in China, which had only limited use for centuries until the gunpowder helped to transform the art of warfare and the paper print revolution saw the versatility of paper. Another good example is how the British new spinning and weaving machines destroyed the Indian handloom industry, which was until then the largest and most advanced in the world. Sometimes changes in economic organization are not due to technology but still have an impact on the society. For example, the plantation agriculture created a heavy demand for labor. This demand helped to establish the institution of slavery and slave trade between the continents of Africa, Europe, and the Americas in the 17th to 19th century. In India too, tea plantations of Assam forced migration of labor from Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Today, changes in custom duties and tariffs brought about by the World Trade Organization can lead to entire industries and occupations being wiped out, or less frequently, sudden periods of prosperity for other occupations and industries. Now let's look at politics. Well, political forces are one of the most important causes for social change. For example, when one society waged war and conquered the other, social change was inevitable and an immediate outcome. So, Congress brought the seeds of change, but at other times, the conquered were actually successful in planting seeds of change among the conquerors and transformed their societies. Let's look at the case of USA and Japan. The United States defeated Japan by using the nuclear bomb and ruled over them for several years, bringing about a lot of changes like land reforms, etc. The Japanese industry had lagged behind the American industry. However, between the 1970s to 1990s, the Japanese industry began dominating the world and managed to alter the industrial landscape of the United States and Europe, especially in industrial technology and production organization. Japan also became the pioneer in electronics. Thus we see that Japan had turned the tables on US not through warfare but through economic and technological means. In India, the Indian independence movement brought an end to the colonial rule, but also an end to the British rule and changes in the Indian society. Generally speaking, political changes bring about social change through the redistribution of power across different social groups and classes. And from this viewpoint, the universal adult franchise or one person, one vote is probably the single biggest political change in history. Modern democracies empower people with a vote to choose their elected representatives, and elections are mandatory for exercising legitimate power. Universal adult franchise serves as a powerful norm that exerts pressure on every society and every government, and this has brought massive social changes in our modern society. Now we move on to culture. Culture, in short, are the ideas, values, and beliefs that shape the lives of the people. One social cultural institution that has had enormous social impact is religion. Religious beliefs and norms have helped organize society, and religion has been important, so much so that some scholars have defined civilization in religious terms and viewed history as the process of interaction between religions. However, the thing to note is religion is contextual. That is, it is able to produce effects in some contexts but not in others. Max Weber's study, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, showed how religious beliefs of some Christian Protestant sects helped to establish the capitalist social system. In India, we have the impact of Buddhism on social and political life of ancient India and the widespread influence of the Bhakti movement on medieval social structure, including the caste system. A different example of cultural change leading to social change can be seen in the evolution of ideas about the place of women in society. Women have struggled for equality, and the struggle in the modern era has helped change society in many ways. During World War II, women in Western countries took up factory jobs like operating heavy machinery and manufacturing arms and shipbuilding, etc., while the men were engaged in war. Thus, World War helped them to establish their claims to equality, which otherwise would have taken longer. A very different instance of change produced in the position of women can be seen in consumer advertising, where advertisers realize that everyday household purchase decisions are mostly taken by the women, and so they understood that they needed to be sensitive to the views and perspectives of women as consumers. This replaced the earlier general idea of only targeting men, as they were only viewed as the economically important ones for the advertisers and manufacturers. Another instance of cultural change bringing about social change can be found in the history of sports. Games and sports have always been expressions of popular culture. Let's take the example of cricket, which started off as a pastime of the British aristocrats. Then it spread to the British middle class and working class. Gradually, it spread to the British colonies. This game became a symbol of national or racial pride, evident in the matches between, say, England and Australia or England and the West Indies. This represented social pride on the fact of the colonized countries for beating their colonizer, that is, the Britishers, in the game. In India, too, defeating England at cricket was always seen as something special, particularly before independence. At another level, cricket's popularity in India has also altered the commercial profile of the game. So, from the examples, we can note that no single factor or theory can account for social change. The causes of social change can be internal or external, the result of deliberate actions or accidental events. Moreover, the cause of social change are often interrelated. Social change has many dimensions and forms, like the economic and technological causes may have a cultural component. Politics may be influenced by environment. Change is an important subject for us as its pace is much faster than it used to be. Note social change is better understood retrospectively, but we need to be aware of it as it happens and to prepare for it in whatever ways we can. So, we've completed social change and let's move on to social order. Note social change has to be understood together with social order, which is the tendency within established social systems that resists and regulate change. Another way of looking at the relationship between social change and social order is to look at the possible reasons why society needs to prevent or discourage or at least control change. A society as a strong and viable system must be stable and reproduce itself over time. Stability means sameness and continuity, so as to have individuals and institutions have results of a predictable manner. So, societies resist change. Most societies, most of the time, are stratified in unequal ways in terms of economic status, political power, and social status. The ruling groups in society want to continue being dominant and have things favorably their way, so they generally resist social changes that may alter their status and vested interests. The pressed group hanker for change. Normal conditions, so as to speak, usually favor the rich and powerful, and they are able to resist change. This is another broad reason why societies are generally stable. Note the notion of social order is not restricted to the idea of resistance to change. It also has a more positive meaning. It refers to the active maintenance and reproduction of particular patterns of social relations and of values and norms. Generally speaking, social order can be achieved in any one of these two ways. Number one, when people spontaneously wish to abide by a set of rules and norms. This arises from shared values and norms which are internalized by the people through the process of socialization. However, socialization can never completely erase the will of an individual, and there will be never permanent and complete consent for all norms at all times. So, socialization to an extent does produce social order. Number two, when people are compelled in various ways to obey such norms. That is, in modern societies, there is some form of power or coercion to ensure that institutions and individuals conform to established norms. If a social entity, like say a person or an institution or a group, is routinely or habitually in a position of power, it is said to be dominant. In normal times, dominant institutions, groups, or individuals exercise decisive influence on society. Note it is not as though they are never challenged, but this happens only in abnormal or extraordinary times. Every society employs a combination of these methods to sustain social order. So, what is domination? Well, domination is whereby Dominant groups extract cooperation in unequal relationships because of their power. So, domination operates through power, but much of this power is legitimate power or authority. Legitimacy implies acceptance that is involved in power relations. People, by virtue of being members of the society, conform to the existing norms of right, propriety, and justice. This is because the power is viewed as legitimate power or authority, and a large part of it is codified by law. The authority is explicitly provided to them by their official job description, with written documents specifying their authority within its proper domain. Consent and cooperation are obtained on a regular and reliable basis because of the backing of the structure of legitimation with formal institutional support. Note there are many other kinds of power that are effective in society and are not legitimate or codified by law. Their authority is not strictly defined, but they are able to gain consent and cooperation. Examples are a religious leader or criminal gang leader, or intellectuals and scholars of repute. It is this mix of legitimate lawful authority and other kinds of power that determines the nature of a social system and also its dynamics. Note, the existence of domination, authority, and law does not imply that they always meet with obedience and conformity. Now let's move over to contestation, crime, and violence. And let's go over them turn by turn. So we begin with contestation. What is contestation? Contestation is simply insistent disagreement. These are broad forms of insistent disagreement in a society, like countercultures among youth or youth rebellions, whereby there is non conformance to prevalent social norms manifesting in the form of hairstyles and clothing, to language or lifestyle. A conventional form of contestation includes elections, which are a form of political competition. Contestations also include dissent or protest against laws or lawful authorities. Note, open and democratic societies allow this kind of dissent to different degrees with explicit and implicit boundaries as defined for them. Crossing these boundaries invites some form of reaction either from the society or from the law enforcement authorities, depending upon the degree of transgression. The notion of crime is strictly derived from the law. A crime is an act that violates an existing law, or simply put, is breaking the law. Sometimes crimes are committed claiming to be of moral virtue, like the breaking of the salt law by Mahatma Gandhi. For Indians, this act was judged for its moral worth. That is, Mahatma Gandhi was going against an unjust law. Conversely, for the British government, Mahatma Gandhi had committed a crime and he was arrested for it as India was under the British rule and their laws prevailed. Now let's move on to violence. One of the defining features of the modern state is that it is supposed to have a monopoly over the use of legitimate violence within its jurisdiction. All other instances of violence are by definition illegal, except for as a form of self defense meant for extraordinary and rare situations. Technically, every act of violence is seen as being directed against the state. So, in the case of murder, the state prosecutes the murderer for violating its monopoly over the legitimate use of violence. So, violence is an extreme form of contestation that transgresses not only the law but important social norms. Violence is the enemy of social order. Now, let's look at social order and change in the village, town, and city. First, let's understand how villages develop. From a sociological point of view, villages emerged as a part of the major changes in social structure that was due to the transition from the nomadic way of life to a more settled form of life and a sedentary form of agriculture. Settled agriculture, along with technological innovation, created surplus and accumulated wealth, which led to social differences. Advanced division of labor created the need for occupational specialization. So these changes paved the way for village as a population settlement based on a particular form of social organization. In economic and administrative terms, the distinction between rural and urban settlements is usually made on the basis of two major factors. Number one, population density. Number two, proportion of agriculture related economic activities. The distinction between a town and a city is more a matter of administrative definition. They're basically the same sort of settlement, differentiated by size. Urban agglomeration is a city along with its surrounding suburban area and satellite settlements. A metropolitan area includes more than one city or a continuous urban settlement many times the size of a single city. The process of urbanization means more and more people living in urban areas as compared to the rural areas, and this is a trend in both developing and developed countries. In India, in 1901, less than 11% of the population was living in urban areas, and if you compare it to 2011, this rose to 37.7%. Now, let's look at social order and social change in rural areas. When we look at a village, the characteristic features that come to our mind are the small size, the personalized relationships, the social structure following a traditional pattern, that is, institutions like caste, religion, and other forms of customary or traditional social practice being much stronger. So, if you look at it, change is slower in a village. Subordinate sections of the society have much less scope for expressing themselves. Lack of anonymity and distance hinders dissent as they can be easily identified and taught a lesson by the dominant sections. Relative power of dominant sections is more as they control most avenues of employment and most resources of the village. So there's a strong power structure already in place in a village, and it's very difficult to dislodge it. The social order is stronger and more resilient in a village. Also, change is slow, and villages are scattered and are not well connected to the rest of the world as cities and towns. In recent times, the television and the telephone and the improved transportation and communication system all have changed the cultural lag between the village and the town. Therefore, changes associated with agriculture or with agriculture social relations have a very major impact on rural societies. Measures like land reforms, which alter the structure of land ownership, have an immediate impact. In India, post independence, the proprietary rights from absentee landlords were taken away and given to the land cultivating groups who cultivated and managed that land in the absence of the landlord. These people belonged to the intermediate castes. They were large in number, and this increased their social status. Over a period of time, combined with other factors, these groups acquired political power and they became dominant castes. In recent years, these castes became very powerful in economic terms and dominated the countryside and electoral politics. M.N. Srinivas called them the dominant caste. In the same way, changes in the technological organization of agriculture, like the introduction of the new labor saving machines or the new cropping pattern, changed the relative bargaining power of the landlord and the laborer. Even if they don't directly affect labor demand, technology or economic changes can change the economic power of different groups and bring forth a chain of changes. Large scale development programs like the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act of 2005 also have an enormous impact. Now let's look at the social order and social change in urban areas. Now, ancient society had cities. Note that urbanism as a way of life for a large number of people is a modern phenomenon. Before the modern era, trade, religion, warfare were the major factors that decided the location and importance of cities. For example, Kozhikode on the Arabian Sea in North Kerala was for trade, and Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh was a temple town and a place of religious pilgrimage. So, city life and modernity go hand in hand. Cities have dense population and are a site of mass politics. Cities provide the modern individual with immense possibilities of fulfillment. How? Well, by providing basic amenities, institutions, and also anonymity. Unlike the village, which does not offer much and hinders individuality. Note, in cities, freedom and opportunity are available only to some individuals, that is, those individuals who are socially and economically privileged. Most city people have limited and relative freedom within larger constraints. In fact, group identity based on race, religion, caste, class, region are intensified in cities due to space limitations and are a strategy of survival, resistance, and assertion. Most of the important issues and problems of social order in towns and cities are related to the question of space. It becomes a formidable challenge to manage things like housing and residential patterns, mass transit systems for workers, managing the coexistence of residential, public, and industrial land use zones, and urban governance. Let's look at the problem of urban housing. Shortages for the economically weaker sections of the society leads to homelessness and also the emergence of slums. Slums become breeding grounds for extra legal activities, whether criminal or real estate related. For the economic well off, residential areas in cities are almost always segregated by class generally and also other variables like race, ethnicity, and religion. In India, communal tension results in the conversion of a mixed neighborhood into a single community neighborhood. This can, over a period of time, lead further to ghettoization. Another worldwide phenomena is of gated communities, and this is also found in Indian cities. That is, the affluent neighborhoods are separated from their surroundings by walls and gates, and they have controlled entry and exit. Many such communities also have their own parallel civic facilities such as water, electricity, policing, and security. Finally, housing patterns are linked to the economy of the city in crucial ways. The urban transport system is directly affected by the location of the residential areas relative to the industrial and commercial workplaces. The transport system has a direct impact on the quality of life of working people in the city. Problems of traffic congestion and vehicular pollution are a regular feature nowadays. Across the world, the city center or the core area of the original city has had many ups and downs. Being power center in the 19th century and earlier 20th century, the city center went through a period of decline in the latter half of the 19th century as people began to move to the suburbs for a variety of reasons. Now, once again, there has been a trend towards the revival of the city center. A related phenomenon is gentrification, which is a conversion of a previously lower class neighborhood into a middle and upper class one. Developers try to effect this conversion as the real estate prices start to increase, and so does the rental value with rapid technological development. So now the question arises is, how will cities cope with the constant influx of people, what with the rapid technological and social change that the world is experiencing?